My husband lifted his champagne glass in front of 300 employees and said, "Marlene, your service to this company is over. Effective tonight, you are fired." The hotel ballroom went silent. Then Donovan Carter reached for a woman in a silver dress near the stage. "This is Tessa Vale," he said. "She is taking your place as Chief Operations Officer, and she is the woman I am building my future with." Someone dropped a fork. I did not stand. I opened the black folder on my lap to the certified page showing my 82% ownership of Carter Ridge Logistics and slid it toward our corporate attorney. "Graham," I said, calm enough for the microphone to catch it, "please proceed." Donovan frowned. "Proceed with what?" "With the fact that you just fired the owner of the company." 5 minutes later, security escorted my husband out of the banquet he had planned as my humiliation. Only then did the room start breathing again, but I am getting ahead of myself. My name is Marlene Carter, and for most of my adult life, I was the woman people thanked after they thanked my husband. Donovan shook hands. I checked contracts. Donovan gave interviews. I fixed payroll. Donovan stood on stages under bright lights. I walked warehouses before sunrise and asked dispatchers why 3 trucks were still sitting in Bay 7. I did not mind that arrangement at first. When Donovan and I married, we were not rich. We were 2 tired people in a small apartment outside Charlotte, trying to make our bills line up with our dreams. He had a way of filling a room with possibility. He could talk about freight lanes and regional supply routes with the same excitement other men had for sports cars. I was quieter. I noticed numbers, clauses, names, dates, the kind of details people call boring until those details save them. Back then, I thought we fit together. He loved the pitch. I kept track of the terms, the invoices, and the risks nobody clapped for. Carter Ridge Logistics began because Donovan had an idea and no bank wanted to fund it. We sat through meeting after meeting with loan officers who smiled politely and said the risk was too high. No business history, not enough collateral. Come back in 2 years. Bring a stronger asset sheet. Every rejection took something out of him. One evening, after the 4th bank turned us down, Donovan sat at our kitchen table with his yellow legal pad open in front of him. He had drawn a rough warehouse plan on the top page, loading docks on the east side, office space in the front, a little employee break room he insisted would have decent coffee. "Maybe they are right," he said. I set 2 plates of spaghetti on the table. "About what?" "Maybe I am chasing something too big." I remember how young he looked that night, not in years, but in the way he stared at that legal pad like it had already become useless. "Donovan," I said, sitting across from him, "one closed door is not a verdict." He gave a tired laugh. "Marlene, that was not one door. That was every door in Mecklenburg County." I did not answer right away because I had a door he did not know about. 2 months earlier, my grandfather Vernon Brooks had passed. Grandpa Vernon was not flashy. He owned 3 church suits, 2 good hats, and more commercial property than half our relatives realized. He had spent most of his life buying old warehouses, storage lots, and industrial buildings when other people thought they were ugly. He used to take me with him on Saturdays. I would sit in the passenger seat of his old Cadillac while he drove past loading docks and rail spurs and chain-link fences. "A pretty building can sit empty," he told me once, "but a useful building keeps feeding people." At 10 years old, I thought he was just being grandpa. Years later, I understood he had been teaching me how to see value before other people clapped for it. When he died, his attorney called me into a quiet office downtown and handed me a stack of papers I could barely make sense of at first. Warehouses, commercial land, investment accounts, operating cash, more than I had ever imagined. "Your grandfather left the bulk of the estate to you," the attorney said. I stared at him. "Why me?" He tapped the top page with one finger. "Because he said you knew how to look after things." I cried in my car for 20 minutes after that meeting, not because I felt lucky, because I understood that those papers came with obligations I had not asked for but could not ignore. So when Donovan came home defeated from those banks, I called Grandpa's attorney the next morning. "I want to use part of the estate to help start a logistics company," I told him. He asked me a question I almost did not understand. Are you giving the assets away, Mrs. Carter, or investing them? We are married, I said. Does it matter? It matters because your grandfather trusted you to protect what he built. That sentence settled me. I loved Donovan. I believed in him. I also let the attorney prepare the documents correctly because a business with employees and inherited property needed more than good intentions. The structure was simple. My inherited property, cash, and operating reserves became the foundation of the company. I became the majority shareholder. A smaller portion of shares went into a family trust for any children we might have. Donovan became president and chief executive officer because operations were his dream and he was good at selling that dream to customers. Nothing was secret. Nothing was forged. Nothing was hidden in a drawer. Donovan sat across from Graham Price, our attorney, and signed every incorporation document. He joked that he was glad he had married the smart one. I laughed because I thought he meant it kindly. For many years, maybe he did. Those first years were hard in a clean, honest way. We worked out of one warehouse that smelled like dust, diesel, and old wood. Our first dispatcher brought her own folding chair because we had not ordered enough office furniture. Our first forklift broke down twice in 1 week. Donovan slept on a sofa in the tiny front office when weather delayed shipments. I learned how to talk a driver through a route change at midnight while nursing a fever and balancing the next day's payroll. We were tired all the time. We were happy anyway. Then the company grew. 1 warehouse became 2, then 4, then distribution contracts across the Carolinas. We hired drivers, mechanics, dispatchers, accountants, warehouse crews, route planners, customer service reps. Employees got married, had babies, lost parents, bought houses, sent children to college. A business is never only trucks and invoices. It is people building their lives around a paycheck they trust. I understood that. Donovan used to understand it too. In the early days, he knew everybody's name. He knew who needed overtime before Christmas. He knew whose mother had surgery. He knew which driver packed peanut butter crackers for every long route. Employees respected him because he had stood beside them with his sleeves rolled up. Then the cameras found him. Local magazines called him a visionary founder. Business groups invited him to speak. Politicians shook his hand at ribbon cuttings. Customers asked for pictures with him at conferences. He became the story people wanted to tell about Carter Ridge Logistics. I did not correct them. That was my mistake. At first it seemed harmless. Donovan would say, "My company," in an interview, then squeeze my hand under the table later and whisper, "You know what I mean." I did know, or I thought I did. But he said it often enough that I began to hear something different in his voice. By the time our 24th anniversary banquet arrived, Donovan no longer sounded like a man using shorthand. He sounded like a man who had edited me out of his own history. The banquet was held in the ballroom of the Rosemont Grand Hotel in Charlotte. 300 employees, spouses, vendors, board members, and a few local reporters sat at round tables under chandeliers. There were framed photos from our early years on easels near the entrance. The first warehouse, the first truck, the first safety award, the old break room with mismatched chairs. I had approved the photo display myself. That is one of the strange parts. Donovan let me help decorate the stage for the night he meant to use it against me. Tessa arrived late, which I later understood was intentional. She wanted people to notice her. She wore silver, with earrings long enough to catch every camera flash. She had worked at Carter Ridge for less than a year in business development. She was bright, ambitious, and far too impressed by Donovan's version of events. I had known about her for 8 months, not from a dramatic confession, not from a private investigator, from receipts, travel schedules, hotel invoices, and the quiet courage of an HR director named Trina, who knocked on my door one rainy Tuesday and asked if she could speak freely. "I hope I am wrong," Trina said. "So do I told her. She placed a folder on my desk. "These reimbursements do not match the expansion trip calendars." I looked at the first page and felt something in me go still. Charleston, Atlanta, Nashville. 2 rooms booked, 1 later canceled, late dinners charged after meetings had ended. Weekend travel coded as client development when no client meeting existed. No single receipt broke my marriage. The pattern did. I confronted Donovan once, on a Sunday morning while the coffee was still warm. He stood at the kitchen counter scrolling through his phone. "Is there someone else?" I asked. He looked at me like I had insulted him. "No." One word. No tremor. No pause. No shame. I think that hurt more than the affair. The affair was one wound. The steadiness of that lie told me he had already practiced living with it. After that, I stopped asking. I started organizing. I did not plan revenge. I planned protection. Carter Ridge had hundreds of employees depending on stability. If Donovan was reckless enough to misuse company money and careless enough to confuse an affair with succession planning, I needed every document ready. So when he took the microphone at the banquet and said he had one more announcement, I already knew he was about to do something foolish. I did not know he would be cruel. "This company is ready for fresh energy," he told the room after firing me. "Some people get comfortable after too many years in the same chair." Tessa laughed softly, as if he had said something clever. I watched faces across the ballroom. Paulette from accounting had gone pale. Ramon, our warehouse manager, stood halfway out of his chair. Mr. Bell from maintenance stared at Donovan like he had never seen him before. My daughter Simone covered her mouth with one hand. Donovan leaned toward the microphone again. "Human Resources has already been instructed to clear out Marlene's office in the morning." Trina's face flashed with anger. She had received no such instruction. "Divorce papers will follow," he added. "I believe in making clean transitions." The room heard the insult. I heard the arrogance underneath it. He was not only ending a marriage, he was trying to make every employee watch me become small. I lifted the black folder from my lap and set it on the table in front of Graham Price. Graham had been our corporate attorney since before Carter Ridge had a sign on the building. He had gray at his temples now and the same careful way of moving, like every gesture had been reviewed for accuracy. He looked at me once. I nodded. "Graham," I said, "please proceed." Donovan's smile thinned. "Proceed with what?" Graham stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the stage steps. "Donovan," I said, loud enough for nearby tables and the microphone to catch me, "you should have read the governance documents before you tried to remove me." He laughed. "Marlene, sit down before you embarrass yourself." I stayed seated. I am not the one standing on a stage firing someone I do not have the authority to fire. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Donovan turned sharply toward Graham. "Tell her." Graham opened the folder. "Mrs. Carter is correct." The room went so quiet I could hear ice settling in glasses. Donovan blinked. "Excuse me?" "Marlene Carter has been the majority shareholder of Carter Ridge Logistics since incorporation," Graham said. "She owns 82% of voting shares. The remaining shares are held in the Carter Family Trust." Tessa's hand slipped out of Donovan's. He did not seem to notice. "That is not true," he said. Graham removed the top page and held it where the board members in the front row could see it. "The articles of incorporation, shareholder agreements, capital contribution records, and annual filings all say otherwise. I am the CEO." "Yes," Graham said. "You are the chief executive officer. I built this company." Graham's voice stayed even. "You manage the company. Ownership is a separate matter." Those words landed harder than any insult I could have delivered. Donovan looked at me then, not as a husband, not even as an opponent, but as a man who had found a locked door in a house he thought belonged to him. "When were you going to tell me?" he asked. I held his eyes. "When were you going to tell me about Tessa?" The murmur became louder. Someone near the back whispered, "Lord!" Tessa straightened. "This is personal drama. It has nothing to do with company leadership." I looked at her for the first time that night. "Misusing company travel funds has everything to do with company leadership." Her face lost color. Donovan pointed at Graham. "You are fired." Graham did not move. "You do not have the authority to terminate my engagement with the company." "I just did." "No," Graham said. "You spoke into a microphone." A few people gasped. Donovan's neck flushed dark. He turned toward the two security officers near the ballroom doors. "Escort her out." The officers took 2 uncertain steps forward. Both had worked our events for years. The older one, Mr. Sykes, looked from Donovan to me and stopped. I said, "Remove her," Donovan snapped. Mr. Sykes cleared his throat. "Sir, this is an official company event." "Exactly. Then we take direction from company ownership or the board." Donovan stared at him. "Are you refusing an order?" The younger officer did not answer. He looked at me instead. I closed the folder. "No one is removing me," I said. "And no one is removing him until the board acts." That was my first cold choice of the night. Not to humiliate him back. To let process do what anger could not. Before I go farther, tell me where you are listening from tonight. Your city, your state, or even what time it is where you are. I always like knowing who is sitting with me during a story like this. Leonard Shaw, our board chair, rose from his table. Leonard had known Donovan and me since our second warehouse. He was not a dramatic man. He had spent his career in banking, and he treated bylaws with the same respect other people reserved for scripture. "I am calling an emergency executive session," Leonard said. Donovan stepped away from the microphone. "You cannot be serious." "I am." "In the middle of a banquet?" Leonard looked around at 300 stunned employees. "You chose the venue." The board gathered in a side room off the ballroom. Graham went with them carrying certified copies of the corporate records, board minutes, shareholder agreements, expense summaries, and ethics policy. Donovan tried to follow. Leonard stopped him. "You are the subject of the review," he said. "You need to wait here." That was when Donovan realized the room had changed. No one had to shout. No one had to clap for me. The silence itself had shifted. Employees who had looked afraid a minute earlier now watched him with something colder than anger. "Disappointment," Tessa whispered in his ear. He shook her off. For 14 minutes, Donovan stood near the stage with the microphone dangling at his side. He looked at the boardroom door, then at me, then at the employees who had once hurried to make room for him in every hallway. Nobody moved toward him. When the board returned, Leonard walked to the microphone. "Effective immediately," he said, "Donovan Carter is placed on administrative leave pending a formal review of executive conduct, misuse of company resources, and violation of succession and ethics procedures." Donovan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Leonard continued, "Marlene Carter remains majority owner and chief operations officer. All employee positions remain unchanged unless otherwise communicated through proper channels." The relief in the room was almost physical. Donovan found his voice. "This is a setup." I stood then. "No, this is a consequence." Mr. Sykes and the younger officer approached Donovan carefully. "Mr. Carter," Mr. Sykes said, "we will walk with you outside." "I am not leaving my own banquet." Leonard's face softened, but his voice did not. "Donovan, you are." Tessa grabbed her small silver purse from a chair and hurried after him. At the door, Donovan turned back one last time, searching the ballroom for someone who would defend him. Not one person stood. The doors closed behind him. The banner still hung above the stage. The music stands were still empty. Dessert sat untouched on white plates. A celebration had become a reckoning, and no one seemed to know what to do with their hands. So I walked onto the stage and picked up the microphone my husband had dropped. "I know many of you are worried," I said. Several people nodded. "Let me answer the first question. No one else is losing a job tonight." Paulette from accounting pressed a napkin under her eyes. Ramon sat down hard, like his knees had finally given way. Someone near the kitchen doors exhaled so loudly a few people turned. "Customer contracts are secure," I continued. "Payroll is secure. Tomorrow morning the trucks will leave on schedule. Dispatch will answer phones, warehouses will open, and if anyone has questions, my office door will be open at 7. That was not a speech. It was triage. People needed steady ground before they needed inspiration. Only after the room settled did I say the truth that had taken me too long to say. Carter Ridge was never built by one person. It was built by every employee who showed up when the work was ordinary and hard. I should have said that more often. I am saying it now. No one cheered at first. Then Mr. Bell stood. He was 71, with silver hair and hands that could fix anything with an engine. He had been with us since the first building. He stood slowly, buttoned his suit coat, and gave one small nod. Others followed. It was not the roaring applause Donovan had expected for his announcement. It was quieter, heavier, the kind of respect that does not need noise to be real. That night, I drove home alone. The house was dark except for the porch light. Donovan's car was gone. So was his leather overnight bag, the one I had bought him for our 20th anniversary because he said successful men needed good luggage. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and looked at the half-empty closet. I used to think betrayal would feel loud. That morning, it felt like noticing which hangers were missing. I slept 3 hours. At 6 the next morning, I made coffee, put on a navy suit, and read the emergency board notes at the kitchen table. By 7:30, I was at the office. Employees were already there, more than usual. Some pretended to be working. Some stood in small groups. Some looked ashamed, as if they had witnessed something private by accident. I walked through every department, accounting first. Paulette had 2 spreadsheets open and red eyes. "Morning," I said. She stood too quickly. "Mrs. Carter, I am so sorry." "For what?" "For last night. You did not do it." Her mouth trembled. "Still," I touched the back of the chair beside her desk. "Payroll runs Friday?" "Yes, ma'am." Then that is where we start. Next was dispatch. The phones were already ringing. 3 drivers had weather delays near Asheville. A customer in Raleigh wanted confirmation on a delivery window. Ramon was on the warehouse floor with a clipboard and the expression of a man trying to keep 40 people calm with body language alone. "How are we looking?" I asked. He glanced toward the crew, then lowered his voice. "People are nervous." "I know. They are asking if Mr. Carter can come back and shut everything down." "He cannot." Ramon studied my face. "You are sure?" "I am." He nodded once. "Then I will tell them." That was how the first week went. One question at a time. No big speeches, no victory lap, no pretending my marriage had not split open in public. By noon the day after the banquet, Charlotte's business circle had already turned the story into 10 different versions. A supplier called to ask if Donovan had been arrested. A reporter emailed to ask whether Tessa had been named CEO. A former client texted me, "Heard you sold the company to private equity. Is that true?" By the time people were embarrassed to ask for facts, the rumors had already made themselves comfortable. Graham called at 1. "You need to be ready," he said. "For Donovan?" He retained a public relations firm. I looked through my office window at the warehouse yard. 2 trucks were backing into loading bays. Work had not stopped just because my life had cracked. "What is he saying?" Graham paused. "That you manipulated him. That you changed ownership papers over the years while he focused on operations." I closed my eyes. "Can he prove that?" "No." "Then why say it?" "Because the truth makes him look careless." By 3 o'clock, Donovan's interview was online. He sat in a studio chair with tired eyes and a tie that did not match his shirt. The host asked gentle questions. Donovan said he had trusted his wife. He said he had been blindsided. He said he was reviewing decades of paperwork. "Do you believe documents were altered?" the host asked. Donovan leaned forward. "I believe I was misled. Not yes, not no. Just enough smoke for people who wanted a fire. The problem was that corporate records are not diary pages. They do not change because someone whispers in a hallway. Our incorporation papers were filed with the state. Annual reports matched tax filings. Capital contributions matched bank records. Board minutes matched shareholder registers. Outside auditors had reviewed the structure for years. By the next morning, 3 attorneys Donovan did not hire were explaining that online. Tessa tried a different strategy. Her social media filled with polished photos, a rooftop dinner, a glass of champagne, a caption about choosing joy, a hotel balcony in Nashville from a trip she claimed was for new beginnings. I did not respond. I still did not respond. Graham's filings could answer better than my anger could. 2 days later, Graham filed our response to Donovan's preliminary ownership challenge. It included certified records, meeting minutes, signed acknowledgments, expense summaries, and a statement from Leonard confirming the board's emergency action. Donovan's attorneys asked for time. The court gave them less than they wanted. Meanwhile, I kept walking the building. People told me things they had been holding for years. Not gossip, not cruelty, small pieces of a picture I should have seen sooner. He stopped coming to safety meetings, Ramon said. He stopped reading employee hardship requests, Trina told me. He would ask for reports and then forget he asked, Paulette said. Mr. Bell put it the plainest. He found me near Bay 3 one afternoon and wiped grease from his hands with a blue shop towel. Mrs. Carter, can I say something? Always. Your husband used to know who kept this place running. I waited. Then he started thinking the building ran because he walked into it. That one stayed with me. The hardest part was telling my children what they had only partly witnessed. Miles came to the house 2 nights after the banquet. He was 29, tall like Donovan, with my habit of rubbing his thumb against his knuckle when upset. His wife stayed in the living room while he followed me into the kitchen. How long did you know about her? He asked. 8 months. His face tightened. 8 months? I needed facts, and I needed to protect the company. You should have told us. Maybe. No, Mom, you should have. I did not argue. Adult children are still children when a parent's betrayal rearranges the floor beneath them. Simone came the next morning. She brought muffins no one ate and sat with me on the back porch. I kept thinking if you stayed calm, it meant you were okay, she said. I was not okay. She nodded, eyes full. I know that now. For years, I had believed dignity meant not letting my children see the depth of my pain. That week taught me dignity can become distance if you hide too much. On Friday, the first legal decision came back. Graham walked into my office with a folder and the first real smile I had seen from him in days. The judge denied Donovan's emergency motion. I leaned back. Already? The documentation is too clean. Meaning? Meaning he can still argue in divorce court over personal property, but he cannot walk into Carter Ridge and claim ownership he never had. I looked down at my hands. I did not feel like celebrating. I felt tired in a way that told me how long I had been holding my breath. That evening, I drove home and found a florist box on my porch. No card. White roses. Donovan used to send white roses when he had done something wrong but did not want to say the words. I carried the box inside, set it on the counter, and left it unopened until morning. When I finally lifted the lid, the flowers were already browning at the edges. That felt about right. Tessa lasted 26 days. I did not learn that from spying. I learned it from a mutual acquaintance who called with the careful tone people use when delivering news they know you did not ask for. Marlene, I thought you should know. Tessa moved out. I did not know she had moved in. There was a pause. She thought Donovan owned the house. I almost laughed, but not because it was funny. The brick house where Donovan and I raised Miles and Simone had been purchased through my grandfather's estate years before Carter Ridge became profitable. It was in my name, documented as separate property. Donovan knew that too, though he had apparently forgotten it at the worst possible time. After the banquet, he rented a luxury apartment uptown. Tessa expected the life he had described to her. The house, the club membership, the private trips. The money that did not require permission from attorneys. What she got was a man under board review, legal bills, and a reputation cracking in public. She left a note while he was meeting with his third lawyer. "This is not the future you promised me." I heard that line and felt no triumph. Just the strange sadness of watching 2 people discover they had been in love with an advertisement. A month after the banquet, Donovan requested a settlement meeting. We met in Graham's conference room downtown. The room had a long walnut table, a wall of law books, and a view of traffic moving slowly below. Donovan arrived 10 minutes late, not late enough to be rude by accident, late enough to prove he still wanted the room to wait for him, but he looked tired. His suit was expensive but wrinkled. His eyes had the dull heaviness of a man not sleeping well. For the first time since the banquet, I saw not the man who had humiliated me, but the man who had once sat at our kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and too much hope. Marlene, he said. Donovan. Graham slid the proposed settlement across the table. I had asked him to make it fair, more than fair, according to the law. Donovan would keep his retirement accounts, several investments, his personal vehicle, his personal savings, and half of jointly owned household property. I was not trying to strip him bare, but Carter Ridge Logistics was excluded. He read for a long time, page after page. This time, no laughing about legal stuff, no kiss on the forehead, no joke about me being the smart one. Finally, he looked up. "You are keeping everything." "No," I said. "I am keeping the company." "Same thing?" "It is not. You could give me half." "I cannot give away what was never yours." His jaw worked.
Well, I spent 24 years there. So did I. I was the face of that company. Yes. Customers came because of me. Some did. Employees followed me. I let that sit for a moment. Donovan, last month you told security to remove me, and they looked at me for permission. He flinched. I did not say it to hurt him. I said it because truth had become the only language left between us. That does not mean they hated you, I added. It means they knew where trust had been living. He pushed the papers back. I am not signing. Graham leaned forward. This offer is significantly better than what a court is likely to order. Then let the court order it. Donovan stood and buttoned his jacket with trembling fingers. At the door, he turned to me. You always needed to prove you were better. I shook my head. No. I needed you to remember I was beside you. He left. Graham waited until the door closed. That was an expensive sentence. I looked at the unsigned papers.
Pride usually is. The formal review concluded 3 weeks later. The board removed Donovan as CEO for cause, citing misuse of company resources, failure to disclose a personal relationship affecting succession planning, and conduct damaging to employee trust. The language was dry. Corporate documents often are. They can describe a marriage ending with the same tone they use for a lease renewal. We appointed an interim president from inside the company, a woman named Anita Jefferson, who had run regional operations for 9 years and knew more about our delivery network than any consultant we could have hired. That mattered. People were tired of outsiders with big promises. They trusted people who had been there when the loading dock flooded in 2011, when the fuel contract almost collapsed, when a hurricane shut down half our routes. Anita's first meeting with department heads lasted 47 minutes. She did not use slogans. She asked questions. Who was overloaded? Which customer accounts were fragile? Where had Donovan's spending pulled money from maintenance? Which managers needed support rather than pressure? When she walked out, Ramon told me, "She listens like she expects the answer to matter." That was the first time I felt the company breathe normally again. Over the next few months, we made practical changes. We reviewed executive expenses and restored money to delayed equipment repairs. We created a profit-sharing pool for warehouse and driver teams. We expanded tuition support for employees seeking certifications. We set aside an emergency fund for workers hit by medical bills, house fires, funerals, and sudden family crises. None of it made headlines. That was fine. The people who needed to know knew. One Wednesday, Trina brought me the first quarterly report after Donovan's removal. She placed it on my desk without speaking. "Is it bad?" I asked. "Read page 2. Revenue was up. Customer retention had improved. Employee turnover had dropped to the lowest level in 6 years. Absenteeism was down. Safety reporting had increased, which sounded bad until Anita explained it meant employees trusted management enough to report problems before someone got hurt. I looked up. "All this in 1 quarter?" Trina smiled. "People are not wasting energy being afraid. Fear is expensive. It never appears as a line item, but it drains everything." While Carter Ridge steadied, Donovan shrank. That is the only way I know how to say it. He sold the car he used to park across 2 spaces near the executive entrance. He moved from the luxury apartment to a smaller condo outside the city. Consulting clients took meetings, then decided they were going in another direction. In business, reputation is not only about whether people know your name, it is about what they remember feeling when they hear it. Miles saw him first. He came by my office late one afternoon and stood in the doorway for nearly a minute before speaking. "Mom? Come in." He sat across from me. "I had lunch with Dad." I closed the file in front of me. "How is he?" Miles rubbed his thumb against his knuckle. "Not good." Those two words can hold an entire room. "Is he sick?" "No, just—" He looked toward the window. "Lost." I waited. "He keeps saying everybody turned on him." "What did you say?" "That maybe everybody was tired of being turned away." I felt that one in my chest. Miles swallowed. "I am angry at him, but I do not want him destroyed." "Neither do I." He looked surprised. "You don't?" "No." "After what he did?" "Holding someone accountable is not the same as wanting them ruined." Miles nodded slowly, but I could tell he was not sure yet. Maybe I was not either. Simone handled it differently. She stopped answering Donovan's calls for almost 2 months. Then, one Sunday evening, she came to the house with her 2 little girls and asked if we could cook dinner the way we used to. We made chicken, rice, green beans, and sweet potato pie from my mother's old recipe card. The girls spilled flour on the floor and sang nonsense songs at the kitchen island. For a few hours, the house sounded alive again. After the children fell asleep on the sofa, Simone washed dishes while I dried. "Dad texted me," she said. "What did he say?" "That he missed the girls." "Do you believe him?" She kept scrubbing the same plate. "Yes, that is what makes it hard." I took the plate gently from her hands. I kept drying dishes because I did not have a simple answer for pain that still had love mixed into it. 6 months after the banquet, Leonard called me early on a Tuesday. "Would you take a drive with me?" "Should I be worried?" "No." "I just think you should see something." He picked me up at 9 and drove away from downtown, past newer developments and shopping centers, toward the old industrial stretch where Carter Ridge had begun. The first warehouse still belonged to the company. We used it for overflow storage and training now. It looked smaller than I remembered, with faded brick and loading doors that had been repainted so many times the metal looked thick at the edges. Leonard parked near Bay 1. "Why are we here?" I asked. "Because someone asked permission to visit." Through the open side door, I saw Donovan. He stood near one of the old support posts, his hand resting on the wood. No tailored suit, no gold watch, khakis, a blue shirt, and shoulders that looked lower than they used to. For a moment, memory played a cruel trick. I saw the younger Donovan, excited, scared, pacing that empty space while telling me where the dispatch desk would go. Then he turned and saw us. Embarrassment crossed his face before pride could cover it. "I did not know you were coming," he said. Leonard answered, "I thought Marlene should know you asked." Donovan looked at me. "I did ask." "I know." It mattered more than it should have. He had asked instead of assuming. Leonard stepped back. "I will be outside." Then Donovan and I were alone in the warehouse where our public success had started and our private truth had always been waiting. He ran his hand along the support post. "I come here sometimes." "Why?" "Because I remember myself here." I did not answer. "I was scared then," he said. "But I was useful. I knew how to work. I knew how to ask for help." He gave a small, bitter breath. Somewhere along the way, I started thinking being admired was the same as being needed. A forklift beeped in the distance. 2 workers laughed near the far loading bay, unaware of the history standing 20 yards away from them. Donovan looked toward the sound. "They seem happier." "They are steadier." "That is a careful word." "It is the right one." He nodded. "I used to think people respected me." "Many did." "And then?" I looked at him. "Then they started managing your moods." That hurt him. I saw it, but he did not fight it. He sat on an old crate, elbows on his knees. "Tessa left." I heard. "Of course you did." "Not from anyone I asked." He rubbed his face. "She wanted the version of me I sold her." "And you?" I wanted the version of me she believed in. That was the most honest thing he had said in a long time. We sat in silence for several minutes. Not warm silence, not healed silence, just silence that did not require performance. Finally he said, "I told myself you trapped me." "I know. But I signed everything." "Yes." "And you used your grandfather's estate." "Yes." "And I knew." I looked at him. "Yes." His eyes filled, but he did not wipe them right away. Then what kind of man forgets that? I did not rescue him from the question. A week later, Simone invited all of us to dinner. I almost said no, not because I wanted to punish Donovan, but because sitting across from him at our daughter's table felt too intimate for people whose divorce papers were still moving through court. Simone did not beg. She simply said, "I want my daughters to see grown people tell the truth without throwing plates." That sounded like my daughter. Dinner was awkward at first. Miles arrived with his wife and stayed near the doorway longer than necessary. Donovan brought store-bought rolls no one had asked for. Simone's girls ran to him anyway because children do not understand adult betrayal in legal categories. They understand grandfathers who lift them too high and sneak them extra dessert. We talked about school, weather, a broken dishwasher, Anita's promotion, anything except the banquet. Then Miles set down his fork. "Dad, I need to say something." Donovan's shoulders tightened. "All right. You keep telling people Mom took the company from you." The table went still. Miles continued. "She did not take it. You forgot who gave you the chance to build it." Donovan looked at his plate. Simone reached for her water glass, then put it down without drinking. "And you did not just embarrass Mom. You embarrassed us too." He nodded once. That surprised me. No defense. No complaint about lawyers. No speech about pressure. Just one slow nod. Simone's voice softened. "I miss who you were before everybody started clapping." Donovan covered his eyes with one hand. The children were in the den watching a movie. From somewhere down the hall came a burst of cartoon music, bright and ridiculous against the heaviness at the table. Donovan began to cry quietly. Not for show. There was no audience worth impressing, no microphone, no board, no Tessa. Just his grown children and the woman he had wounded. I did not reach for him right away. Compassion should not be rushed just because someone finally feels sorry. But after a while, I placed a napkin beside his hand. He took it and whispered, "Thank you." That was all. The divorce finalized 9 months after the banquet. There was no dramatic courtroom scene, no surprise witness, no judge scolding him for 20 minutes, just filings, property schedules, signatures, and facts that had been true long before anyone got angry. Donovan kept what belonged to him. I kept the house in Carter Ridge. The family trust remained intact. The court did not need to punish him. The documents were enough. Afterward, I sat in my car outside the courthouse for a long time. Graham tapped on the passenger window. I unlocked the door. He got in without asking if I was all right. After that many years, he knew better. "It is done," he said. "Legally?" "Yes." I watched people walk up the courthouse steps carrying folders that probably held their own heartbreaks. "Do you think clean endings exist?" Graham considered that. "In contracts sometimes, in families, rarely." I smiled. "That is why you charge by the hour." He laughed softly, and for the first time in months, my own laugh did not feel borrowed from someone else. Carter Ridge had its strongest year in company history. I am careful when I say that. Not because Donovan left and I became some perfect leader. That would be too simple. The company improved because people stopped bracing for the next ego storm. Anita led operations with steadiness. Ramon trained 2 new warehouse supervisors. Paulette found a billing leak that saved us more than anyone expected. Trina rebuilt trust in HR by doing what she had always done best, listening before advising. We held quarterly lunches in the warehouse instead of executive dinners in hotels. We paid safety bonuses. We replaced equipment Donovan had delayed so the numbers would look cleaner during award season. We gave tuition help to 12 employees and emergency assistance to 3 families. One of those families belonged to a driver named Keisha, whose husband had a stroke. She tried to refuse the emergency grant twice. "I do not want special treatment," she told me. "It is not special treatment," I said. "It is what the fund is for." She looked down at the check and cried in a way that made me look away for a second, not out of discomfort, but respect. My grandfather had been right. Useful things keep feeding people. Almost a year after the banquet, Graham knocked on my office door with an odd expression. "You have a visitor." "Who?" He stepped aside. Through the glass wall, I saw Donovan in the reception area. He wore a navy sport coat and no tie. A plain folder rested on his knees. He was not pacing. That alone told me something had changed. "Do you want me to tell him you are unavailable?" Graham asked. I thought about it. Then I said, "No. Send him in." Donovan entered slowly and remained standing until I pointed to the chair. "I won't take much time," he said. "All right." He set the folder on his lap. "I did not come to ask for money." "I did not think you did." He looked surprised, then nodded. "I have spent the last year replaying that night." I stayed quiet. "At first, I replayed what you did, then what Graham did, then what Leonard did, then what the board did." He rubbed his thumb along the folder edge. "It took me a long time to replay what I did." That sounded like a man finally arriving at the right door. "I lied to you," he said. "I humiliated you. I put employees in fear because I wanted to feel powerful. I used company money like nobody else had a claim on it, and I let Tessa believe in a life I had no right to promise." The apology I had imagined for months did not sound like I expected. It was smaller. Better. "I am sorry, Marlene." I looked at the man who had once made me laugh over cold pizza in a broken apartment. I looked at the man who had stood under chandeliers and tried to erase me. Both were true. That is the hard part about loving someone for decades. You remember too much to make them only one thing. "I believe you," I said. His eyes filled. "I do not expect forgiveness." "You already have it." He stared. "Why?" "Because I wanted my life back. Bitterness would have kept too much of it in your hands." He lowered his head. I let the silence sit between us. Then he opened the folder. "I have been volunteering with a workforce nonprofit. Mostly displaced workers, veterans, people trying to start over after they made mistakes, or life made them start over." He slid the folder across the desk. Inside were lesson plans, leadership notes, workshop outlines, a session titled, "When Authority Becomes Appetite," another titled, "The Cost of Forgetting Your Team." I looked up. "You are teaching leadership?" He gave the smallest embarrassed smile. "I am teaching failure." That was the first useful thing he had done with the truth. "They listen?" I asked. "More than I expected. I think people trust a warning from someone who hit the wall himself." I read the first page. It was not polished. It was not impressive in the old Donovan way. It was practical. "Why bring this to me?" He swallowed. "If Carter Ridge ever has young managers who could benefit from hearing what not to become, I would be willing to speak. Not as an executive, not as a board member, not with an office." He looked directly at me. "Just as a caution." A year earlier, I would have heard manipulation. That day, I heard humility still learning how to stand. "I will discuss it with Anita and Trina," I said. "If we do it, there will be a limited consulting agreement and clear boundaries." He nodded quickly. "Of course." "And Donovan?" "Yes?" "No one gets to skip accountability because they found a better speech." He absorbed that. "I understand." "Good." Several months later, Carter Ridge held another anniversary gathering. Not at the Rosemont Grand. I will never spend another dollar teaching chandeliers how to witness family pain. We held it in our largest warehouse. Long folding tables, barbecue from a family-owned restaurant on Beatty's Ford Road, lemonade in plastic dispensers, children chasing one another near a line of parked trucks, employees bringing spouses, mothers, cousins, grandchildren, and covered dishes even though we told them food was provided. It felt like us. Anita spoke first and kept it short because she understood hungry people do not need a corporate lecture between them and barbecue. Leonard thanked the board. Ramon introduced 2 apprentices who had completed their safety certifications. Trina announced the next round of tuition awards. Then Anita handed me the microphone. I looked across the warehouse. I saw Paulette laughing with her accounting team. Mr. Bell sitting with a plate balanced on his knee. Keisha holding her husband's hand. Miles and Simone near the back with the grandchildren, Graham pretending he was not emotional. Donovan stood beside a stack of folded chairs, not on the stage, not near the microphone, not trying to be seen. That mattered too. 25 years ago, I said, this company started in a building not much bigger than this section right here. People turned toward the old photo displayed near the loading bay. We had more hope than equipment, some days more bills than hope, but people showed up. That is still what keeps us moving. Not titles, not banners, not one person's name on a magazine cover. People. I saw Ramon nod. The driver who checks one more strap before leaving, the dispatcher who stays calm when a route falls apart. The mechanic who hears a problem before the rest of us see it, the accountant who catches one wrong number before it becomes a costly mistake, the supervisor who teaches a new hire instead of humiliating him. I paused. That is what built Carter Ridge. That is what will keep building it. The applause came warm and full, but I did not let it wash over me as if it belonged to me alone. I had learned that lesson the hard way. After the food, I walked outside for air. The sun was setting behind the trucks, turning the metal doors copper. Donovan came out a few minutes later and stood a respectful distance away. "You did good in there," he said. "So did everyone." He smiled faintly. "That is what I meant." For a while we watched children run between picnic tables while parents called them back from the loading area. "I start the manager session next month," he said. "Oh, I heard. Trina gave me a list of rules." "I am sure she did. 3 pages. That sounds like Trina." He laughed quietly. Not the old polished laugh. A real one. We were not husband and wife anymore. Some chapters closed because leaving them open would only keep hurting people. But we were parents, grandparents, 2 people tied to the same long road, trying to walk the remaining miles with more honesty than pride. Sunday dinners returned slowly. At first, Donovan came once a month, then twice. He brought dessert. He asked before helping in the kitchen. He listened when Miles talked about work and when Simone corrected one of the girls for climbing on the sofa. He did not try to sit at the head of the table. That was how I knew the apology had roots, not because he cried in my office, because he changed where he placed himself in a room. As for me, I kept going to the warehouse before sunrise. I kept reading contracts twice. I kept visiting departments instead of waiting for reports to reach me polished and late. I kept a framed photo of Grandpa Vernon on the shelf behind my desk, the one where he is leaning against his old Cadillac with a grin like he knows something the rest of us will need 20 years to learn. Under that photo, I keep a copy of the original Carter Ridge Incorporation papers. Not because I expect another Donovan, because memory is tender and paper is steady. When I think back to that banquet now, I do not remember the chandeliers first. I remember the faces. Employees afraid their jobs had become part of a marital performance. My children trying to understand their father in real time. Graham standing with a folder he hoped he would never need. Security officers waiting for the lawful instruction instead of the loudest one. And I remember myself sitting at that table, heartbroken, embarrassed, and still steady enough to open the folder. That steadiness did not come from being cold. It came from 24 years of knowing what I had carried. If betrayal ever finds you in a room full of people, I hope you remember this. You do not have to become cruel to become powerful. You do not have to shout to be heard. And you do not have to let the person holding the microphone decide who owns the truth. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story reminded you of someone who carried the weight while someone else took the spotlight, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about justice, dignity, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild a life, please subscribe and stay with me for the next one.